And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba and the BatFlip, episode 63. We continue our trip through the just depth and deep and just dungeonous and also cool. I'm trying to think of the cool names, and I can't do it, Toby. You got it all. Of the outfield position. There's so many guys to talk about. We're going to talk about another 25 to 30 or so tonight, plus all your awesome listener questions. You guys came through again in a huge way. You can find me on Twitter at BDintric, and you can find my co-host, as always, on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. How we doing, Toby?
We're doing great. This last week was a big week in my family. My wife's birthday was Thursday. My now 4-year-old, his birthday was on Saturday. So we had 2 birthdays. And the best thing about birthdays is ice cream cakes. I don't know if other people have done this, but Baskin-Robbins ice cream cakes. Every birthday growing up, we'd have a Baskin-Robbins ice cream cake. This is not a paid advertisement.
Maybe it's a NorCal thing, like a Davis Woodland thing.
For sure. It could have. I mean, I actually worked at Baskin-Robbins for 3 years in high school.
A lot of my friends in high school did too, so I think there's a connection here.
Yeah, totally. So we used to get them all the time, every single time, and they're just phenomenally good. It's not even the cake, honestly. It's just the ice cream. And we got this cake for my son's birthday, and it's a clown cone cake. So it's like a cake, and then it has clown cones on top of it, which was a hit, of course. But what I didn't realize is that there was no cake. What? It was all ice cream. So it was all ice cream with the frosting on it and stuff like that. So it's like you don't even have to bother eating the actual cake.
That's a new twist.
So yeah, my oldest right now is still awake, and he's actually talking about it in the background. I don't know if
that's awesome. No, that's fine. That's what it's all about.
So good. And Reese's peanut butter.
Oh, my favorite.
Cup ice cream. Oh,
your kid's got good flavor. I'll tell you that much.
I ate some for lunch today. Don't tell him. I said that low so he wouldn't hear.
If I was you, I'd have some for lunch tomorrow too.
Oh, dude, there's so much left. I mean, the one. I hate to say there's any redeeming quality of the pandemic, but your birthday parties are a lot smaller, so there's a lot more ice creim cake
leftovers
to go around. But it's been a fun week, and then we have Christmas coming on, so it's great.
You mentioned ice cream cakes for birthdays. My now wife in college, when I met her, I met her after my birthday, but we had an intramural softball team that made it to the championships. And so we were celebrating at the fraternity house afterwards, and she made funfetti ice cream cake for us.
Wow.
Like two funfetti cakes with a layer of ice cream in the middle. It was...
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah. It was beautiful. It was absolutely amazing. There's a reason I married her. There was one of many, but that's
for sure. For sure. On the East Coast, they have Carvel cakes.
Yes.
You know, the Carvel cakes.
You can order them and have them shipped out here.
Really?
I've seen it online. Yeah, you get them shipped out.
Do that.
Yes, I know. I told Toby the same thing, Smada, when we signed in.
Oh yeah, Thank you, Smada. I actually remember Smada because Smada says Toby, that hat is fire. For those of you who are listening,
and we will get to fantasy baseball eventually. We're having too much fun here right now. So
yeah,
deal with it.
the hat that I'm wearing right now is kind of that maroon old Phillies with like the curly P on it. I don't know if that's a good description of it, but when I was looking to buy it, I had a couple options that I was looking at, and I tweeted them out to see what people thought. And I went with this one. And I remember specifically Smada being like, there's like 3 hats in all of baseball that I want, and that's one of them. So appreciate you, Smada.
It's a sweet lid. But we could sit and talk about all kinds of ice cream cakes, Christmas coming up. We could really not talk about fancy
sugar
baseball.
Cookies. Sugar cookies today. Okay. Yeah, I was like, should I have dinner or should I eat sugar cookie dough?
You know what?
Cookie dough, probably.
A friend of mine over here, he's an actually very good baker. I did not know that. He makes snickerdoodles, and when they're fresh and soft, oh my goodness. Man. Oh my
yeah. Goodness. I mean, we're going to get to fantasy baseball in a second, but I actually have a cookie recipe. It's a peppermint bark cookie recipe. Oh, I shared it on Twitter, actually.
Yeah.
I tweeted it out. Yeah, they're absolutely delicious.
I did not know people put bark in their cookies, and you did, and my goodness.
Do I put bark in my cookies? Holy cow. I do. For those of you who are wondering, I put peppermint bark in my cookies for sure.
That's outstanding. And he found out how much you can and can't put, and he won. So that's all. That's all that matters. He won.
You can put as much as you want. I literally had 3 like bars, like Hershey style bars, and then I had an extra large bag of peppermint bark, and I put it in one batch of cookies. It was so good. Oh my God. Man, that's what we should do. This should be a dessert episode focused on the outfield, and each outfielder we talk about should be some type of dessert.
We'll get through 10 outfielders, maybe. We'll barely get through the outfield. Yeah. That'll be fun. But maybe we'll do a fantasy, our top 10 desserts / fantasy targets this year or something. We can have a lot of fun with it. There's no doubt about it. But let's get into the outfield. I appreciate everyone that stuck around this long because you knew it was coming, but that was fun. I enjoy that kind of the riffing like that.
Yeah, and anytime anybody wants to talk desserts, you hit me up, all right?
Yes, Toby's a dessert connoisseur. My wife is one as well, so I can kind of live vicariously through the two of you. And obviously, if people watch the video, they can see I enjoy them. So we're good there too. All right, we left off. We went through the top 25 last week. So we're to keep it kind of uniform. I still stuck with the November 14th date, but we continued on to the 21st today. And I did this list yesterday, so things changed. Forgive me, people. They'll be close enough. But 26 through 30, we have Jeff McNeil, Charlie Blackmon, Dylan Moore, Kyle Lewis, Byron Buxton. So we're getting, just for reference sakes for people, 26 and beyond in the outfield. We're getting right around pick 100 and later. So the rest of this stuff's going to be, we're talking post round 9 or so, 8, 9 and beyond, where you can start filling in positions and needs. So with those 5 guys, McNeil, Blackmon, Moore, Lewis, Buxton, what stands out to you there?
Yeah, McNeil, we've talked about him in the second base and the third base episode, so I won't spend too much time. But I just think, I think we talked about it in an earlier podcast. But if you are really interested in a light version of like a DJ LeMahieu, I was going to say JT Realmuto. God, what's wrong with me? Of a DJ LeMahieu is like McNeil, right? I mean, the guy has hit over 300. It's 3 seasons in baseball. His career average is over 300. He makes a ton of contact. Just really good hand-eye coordination, bat to ball. So you're going to get that batting average. I think the question mark is where he hits in the lineup, but I think he's good enough where, he can really return value from anywhere, right? Because as long as he gets 550, 600 plate appearances at that 300 plus batting average in the Mets lineup, I think he'll be successful regardless of what happens. So I really like him a lot, and he provides a similar flexibility as DJ LeMahieu would. So again, I'd much prefer the value of McNeil to the value of DJ LeMahieu right now. This is kind of a group of guys, I think, where I don't find myself drafting any of them, like Blackmon. I mean, I think there's, he's going to hit for probably 300. I mean, he had a little bit of decline with the batted ball quality. The steals aren't necessarily there, but doesn't mean he's going to steal 0 bases for you, right? I think he's going to give you a strong batting average, 20, 25 home runs, maybe 6 stolen bases this year, something like that. So it's not going to be a ton, but, that lineup remains good. They haven't traded away the pieces yet. So at the moment of this recording, he should still score a bunch of runs at the top of that lineup. So I actually think that that's a pretty solid move right there. Although I've had 4 drafts so far and I haven't really dipped in there. We talked about Dylan Moore in the second base episode. I think there's a lot to like there. A little bit of volatility in the profile just with the strikeout rate, although we did mention that, I think his strikeout rate this year was a little bit higher than it should be if you look at the underlying metrics. I do have a little bit of concern because he's older, so I don't necessarily think he's a part of the future necessarily of the Mariners. So I do worry a little bit about like what the long term over the course of a season outlook is for him, but he's produced when he's played, and they don't have a ton of really good hitters yet. But you just think about maybe the opportunities are going to be a little bit lean. They want to give Shed Long a look at second base. In the outfield, they have Kyle Lewis. What happens later in the season when they bring in Kalenic, when they bring in Julio Rodriguez potentially? Just so those types of questions about is he a guy who gets traded or something like that. So a little bit of concern there for me, but again, we said before, looks like a 2020 guy potentially, and he's going later in drafts. With Lewis, we saw some improvement last year, improvement in the plate discipline, improvement in the contact rate. The StatCast metrics are still pretty solid, although the hard hit rate is not fantastic. But he's really good. Sorry, I have a 7-year-old wandering around my house right now, who should be in bed sleeping. So if you saw me waving someone away, that was me being a great parent. No judgment.
It's because all my pictures fell down.
All your pictures fell down? All right. Well, you want to know something? I'll be in there in 1 second to grab them for you. All right. While Bubba's talking, and then Buxton, I mean, health is always the issue. And I think the concern with Buxton is we saw last year and with the Twins approach generally, which could always change, but, he wasn't stealing as much, and so it's much more a power profile. And is the power profile all that interesting, with the batting average that you're probably going to get and the injury history that you're looking at? So for me, I'm not super interested in him either going where he's going. So that's kind of a little bit of the review, but certainly one of these years, Buxton is going to have the year, right? Mm-hmm. So, we'll see.
Yeah, no, and we talked about McNeil and more is interesting, like you mentioned, and I just think the deal with those two is if we're drafting them for second base more so than outfield, given the position flexibility is awesome. Like, there will be weeks where you'll use them in the outfield. I think ideally you want them at second base. So that's something to think about when you're approaching this section of the draft. Blackmon is a guy that I just can't stomach. I agree the average should be good. The homers should be decent, and you're not paying a premium for him like you have in years past. He's still going to be in Coors Field in what should be, like you said, a good order. But yeah, you looked last year, fly ball rate dropped quite a bit. The quality of contact, like you mentioned, the hard hit rates, the barrels, all that dropped tremendously. Makes you kind of wonder, was he hurt? What's going on there? He did have COVID, so maybe there's some things there with Blackmon. So he could come back as a value, a guy like you said. I haven't jumped on either. And then you got Lewis and Buxton, kind of two interesting guys to have close to each other. Lewis, like you said, hits the ball really hard. I think he's a good, like the way we talked about like a Teoscar Hernandez, the upside of a Kyle Lewis could be very intriguing. But there's a lot of volatility there. Because even like you mentioned with Moore, when Rodriguez and Kalenic come up, if Lewis struggles, that he could lose his job to them too. And that's just one of those deals. I doubt it, rookie of the year type stuff. You usually don't see that happen, but it can. And so like ask Chris Coughlin about that. So it is possible. So just keep that in mind. I think there's a lot of upside with Kyle Lewis. Just not a guy. This range isn't one I really want to target. I do like Buxton, but I've always been a sucker for Buxton. So I'm going to put that out there out the gate. I love his upside. The power of this last year, not the steals, is interesting. But I've heard some guys talk about it lately, like Mason and some others, that maybe on the shortened season, guys they know get hurt a lot, they're not going to run and risk losing them for a big chunk of the season. So that could be something very interesting. But I do like I like Buxton, like you're saying, Smata. His upside of like 30 and 15 or even 25 and 15, I think is tremendous. He's going to be in that order. They were leading him off towards the end of the year because he's actually hitting for a decent average. If he can keep doing that at the top of the order with the big bats behind him, that's huge. And so Buxton's still a guy that I have circled as a big-time upside guy where the floor, barring staying healthy, which is a big concern with Byron Buxton, is a pretty good floor. And I think in points leagues, he has a lot of upside because he could fill the stats all over the place. So keep that in mind if you're doing a points draft, which we usually don't talk about, but something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, one thing on Buxton, which one thing that's a little alarming is an over 50% O swing this past year. Obviously, small sample size, but to the ballot ball quality piece, and Smata and you are right on that. I mean, it is interesting. I mean, the average exit velocity continues to rise. I mean, this past year, again, small sample size, but 91.2 mile per hour. That's great. Highest barrel rate and hard hit rate of his career. And the contact stuff is not terrible. It's just like if he could just swing at good pitches, I think we'd be in a lot better shape. But I can definitely see that the upside. And again, like you can swing and miss on that pick around this part of the draft where he's going and still survive. I mean, you can anywhere, but here it's not as, scary. And maybe because of the depth of outfield, you can take some later outfielders that give you a little bit more of that cushion or feel a little bit better. So yeah, you guys have maybe convinced me to draft him at some point this draft season.
I just think there's a good floor, and it's like he only hit 254. His XBA was 249, so it's not like he was, shooting over the moon. The O swing, yes, is concerning, but I think part of me tells myself I might appreciate that because it means he's not being stingy. He's actually going out there and doing something. Like it's not pretty. His chase rate jumped to 49%, close to 50%, like you're saying. You're looking at Savant's page, but his chase contact rose to 55%. So he was at least taking advantage. And I think a big thing, and we've seen this looking at different guys, his first pitch swing, usually he's a 30 to 35% guy, jumped up to 51% this year. Much more aggressive on pitches. And we know it's common sense type stuff. A lot of pitchers, not all, but a lot will just groove it in, trying to get a strike. And so Buxton was taking advantage of that, we think. I haven't watched the film, but just looking at his page here, it'd be something to be intriguing about. But to me, the talent's never been a question with Byron Buxton. It's always been, can he stay on the field? And that's
projections love him too.
Yeah. So he's a guy that I keep finding myself just kind of getting drugged back into. And I think a lot of it, like you mentioned as well, is the depth of the outfield. Knowing the way we're going to talk about some guys, a guy that wears the same hat you're wearing right now that we both love. Like I have no problem taking him as like a Buxton replacement type thing or along those lines. So we can talk about, or the next guy, 31 through 35 is led off by Tommy Pham. There's another guy that I like quite a bit, who I think is going too late. They got Eddie Rosario, your boy, Alex Verdugo, Will Myers, and Tommy Edmonds. So this is a group I know you like some names here, and I don't mind somebody. This is like the Toby group right here. So why don't you have some fun with these five?
Yeah, well, I mean, Pham, the issue with Pham is health, obviously. But and the thing about Pham is there's been a narrative, I think, throughout his career that he's always injured, and I feel like he's always playing injured, but he's not necessarily injured. I mean, so he came up in 2017 was the first big year he came up, and he missed the early part of the season. But then after that, he had 530 plate appearances. Then in 2018, he had 570 plate appearances. And then in 2019, he had 654. So over the course of those 3 years prior to last season, he pretty much averaged about 600 plate appearances a year, which is, what you want, right? You can't really project a guy for much more than that. And so, and the speed is going to be there. The on base is there. He's just such a hot, solid hitter overall that I definitely like him a lot. Although, he is 31, I think, if not older. Is he 30, 31?
He's in his early.
He's 32.
Yeah.
He's 32. So he's 32. So, just something to consider. But, I haven't really grabbed him that much in drafts so far this year, but I think it's more just a liking other players at that point in time. So Pham, but he's solid, and I think the profile is solid. Eddie Rosario, same thing. Obviously, he's falling in ADP right now, I think, because he doesn't have a home yet. I expect that he'll get one, and I expect that when he gets a home that he'll be hitting in the middle of whatever lineup that is. If we can use a broad interpretation of middle, say 3 through 6, something like that, depending on the quality. And he's just, the skills are just really, really good. He makes a ton of contact. He hits for power. He chases a ton, which is his weakness, but it hasn't really impacted his ability to put up a high batting average along with a high home run total. And he's pretty quick. I don't think he's a particularly good base stealer, but he steals some bases. And I think moving away from the Twins, that could be a situation where those stolen base totals go up a little bit. So again, I've taken advantage one time, I think, of the lower ADP. I got him around like 125 or so. I think he's falling even further from that right now, but I think he'll end up in a solid situation. I think he's too good of a hitter for that. Only concern might be like a platoon or something like that in a situation where he gets platooned. Verdugo, I like the profile has been good. He was really good last year. This is another one where, my kind of initial beliefs on a player need to be kind of weighed because, what I saw in him was like a batting average guy, not a ton of power, and not many stolen bases, but the stolen bases are okay. I don't think he's going to hit for a ton of power, but the batting average is going to be solid. It always has been. High ground ball rate. So yeah, I think he's fine. If you're looking for maybe a batting average guy, and he should hit at top of that lineup. So that could be a thing. Will Myers, I love Will Myers. I also feel like you got to value each guy each year, right? And last year, I felt like there was an opportunity with Myers, and it worked out for me. I was fortunate around that. I have not been drafting him a ton, just because I guess the one part of the profile from last year that I don't necessarily believe in is the batting average. And the stolen bases were not necessarily there for him. He is 30. So from a batted ball perspective, he was absolutely mashing last year, but I'm not sure that we can count on the same level of stolen bases. Like Steamer has him here, projected for 27 home runs and 13 stolen bases with a 239 batting average. I think the 239 batting average is a little bit low. I think that stolen base total is maybe a little bit high for Myers right now. So I'm in, but I'm not, because I do worry about, that there is a floor there for that batting average that we've seen before. And there's also the health issues. He's had a really hard time staying healthy when he's not playing first base. So again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad pick where he's going, but I'm not necessarily going after him. And we've talked about Edman, and I think what you mentioned before, like if you're drafting Edman, you're going to draft him as a second baseman or a third baseman. I've done that a couple times already. So yeah, that's what I would say. I would say, and I think he's solid. I like him a lot this year, but more for second base and third base than I do for outfield. So that's kind of the group. Yeah,
I completely agree with the Edman thing. Like he's good. There's no problem there, but not my outfield targets. That's for sure. Tommy Pham, I'm a Tommy Pham guy again, and one thing I really like about what Pham did, he was hurt a lot last year. So I think it was like his wrist or his finger or something in his hand area. And once he got healthy, we saw it like the last week of the season and in the postseason, he actually hit the ball very, very well. So that's something to keep in mind, because you look at his overall numbers, like it really stands out. His ISO 101, definitely the lowest of his career. BABIP was only 253, so the average is 211, but still 12% walk rate. Strikeout rate rose a little bit, still ran a lot for all things considered. In 31 games, had 6 steals. That rates out pretty decently. Before last season, 21-25, 21-15, 23-25. 3 straight years of just awesome production with a 273 average or higher. Like the talent's very good. Yes, getting older is a bit of a concern, but even Steamer 22-15. When you dig deeper on Tommy Pham, the things that I really like is you look at the ISO and the BABIP and you get kind of concerned, but the barrel rate's almost identical to 2019, still lower than you'd like them to be, but pretty close to 2019. Hard hit rate was actually the highest of his career, which is great. He did hit 211. His XBA was 266. His WOBA was 282. His XWOBA was 348. So this is one of those guys that has a massive difference in expected stats and regular season stats, which tells you something wasn't right. And one thing that stands out in a big, big way, his ground ball rate went up from 53% to 62%, while his fly ball rate dropped. So he was hitting the ball hard. He's hitting on the ground, thus probably not the best BABIP scenario going on there. So I have no problem with the Pham. Yes, the health's an issue. Yes, the stabbings, as Smata mentioned. He might be a strip club owner due to that, but something to keep in mind with Pham. I still like him quite a bit as maybe not a big ceiling guy, but a really strong floor with like 2020 upside. So I don't mind Pham. Rosario, you hit on him. I want to see where he goes. That's just the biggest thing for me. That's a big question. Verdugo's tough. Like he doesn't really set the world on fire for me, but I see the upside that people are talking about. I'll probably be a year out on him. It'll be one of those guys where I just kind of have to see it to believe it, at least in this range, because there's guys coming up after him. I'd rather take a chance on like Dylan Carlson or something than an Alex Verdugo. So I won't own much of him. And then Will Myers, I love the upside. It's a guy we always talked about with 2020 upside, but you are paying for his career season now, like you mentioned, and that kind of you got to risk rewards there, because it's a guy that we've mentioned like Buxton's health and other guys' health. Myers right up there in that health department conversation. He stayed healthy. He ran pure. He ran really pure. So the talent's there. Former rookie of the year type stuff. It's just a matter of, can he stay healthy? You mentioned it. He's always healthier when he plays first base. That ain't happening with the Hosmer there. So can he stick it out? And if he struggles, they always have a depth of outfielders there to platoon with. So that's another thing with Myers. So it's just one of those, the talent's good. I just don't think I can stomach him at that point. All right, 36-40. You got Mike Yastrzemski, Dylan Carlson, Ramon Laureano, Victor Robles, and Ryan Mountcastle. These later outfielders, there's a lot of intriguing angles to go on these guys to justify taking a chance. So it's going to be fun the next 15 to 20 we talked about. But start with this 5.
Yeah, I think Yastrzemski is solid all around. Really good plate discipline, decent contact, batted ball quality. Everything's pretty good. Another guy I don't find myself really getting in drafts. I think maybe because, he doesn't necessarily excel in batting average or stolen bases. So that might be the reason there. Dylan Carlson, I really like a lot, although it seems like a lot of people really like him. So it may be that my love for him, while true, does not result in having having a lot of him on my teams this year. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, I should look this up, but it seemed like he did really well in the playoffs last year. But when you look at kind of the skill progression from the first time he came up to the second time he came up, everything that you want to see, there, the plate discipline improved dramatically. The contact rate was up. The ground ball rate was down, hard hit rate was up, StatCast data was really nice. And so he just seems like somebody, I've been interested in him for a little bit just because, he was always excelling throughout every stop at the minors, and he was doing that as somebody who was young for his age. And so I just really like that. And then I think, the stolen base power potential, is there for, 2015, something like that, 25, 15, maybe on the upside of it. Don't want to get too, crazy with our projections. I think he's going to hit in the middle of that lineup, and while that lineup may not be the best and that ballpark may not be the best, I think he'll be good enough. And I just see him as a guy who's very good in all of the key skill areas that I'm kind of looking at. The one area where maybe a little bit of improvement is in the StatCast metrics, but I think the possibility is there for him. And isn't he like a switch hitter or something like that?
No, he's lefty.
No, he's just
he does switch hit. Yeah,
he's switch, yeah. He's a switch hitter. So
I never saw him hit right-handed for some reason.
I know. I actually feel the exact same way. But so I really like Dylan Carlson a lot. But again, I think a lot of other people are liking him, and so it's kind of like, and one guy who I do find myself getting a lot of is Ramon Laureano. It's really interesting because, and I think this is why I don't have any shares of FAM, is because last year Pham and Laureano were going around each other, like kind of picks late 60s, early 70s in terms of the picks where they were going at. And now we have this half season, or 1/3 of a season, and all of a sudden Laureano is dropping way back. And if you look under the hood, though, it's really interesting. So he hit 213 on a 270 BABIP, right, which is well below his 335 career. If you look at his O swing, it was the best of his career. If you look at his contact rate, it was by far the best of his career. Hard hit rate suffered a little bit. StatCast metrics suffered a little bit, but max exit velo was the same. Barrel rate was the same. So and it seemed like he was just starting to mash, when the season came to an end. And so again, you're talking about a guy who I think is pretty much identical to the guy that we saw, in 2019 that had us thinking he was a 75th guy going around pick 75. And now we have this abbreviated season and nothing's really changed, right? If anything, the skills have improved, but the results weren't there. And I think this is the type of guy that you really got to jump on, and you just got to say, hey, like nothing really changed. He's still young. He's still doing the exact same things that made him successful. So why are we going to put a lot of stock in this last year? He's projected for 23 home runs, and 11 stolen bases. But what weighs down his projection, I think, in a lot of ways, is the batting average, which they have at 249. But he's career 270. And that counts the 213 from last year. I just think with the speed and with the batted ball quality that he has, that I think it's reasonable to believe that he can have an elevated BABIP. His line drive rate first 2 years was 25%, down to 22% this year. So again, I think he's the exact same guy he was before, and I'm all over him if he's available. Robles, we've talked about a little bit. I think we've gotten some questions about him. I still like Robles. I worry because, the batted ball concerns did come true. And, and part of that I think was off season and not, coming into camp in shape, partially because of the COVID stuff, but he had gained some weight. He had lost speed. When Jeff Zimmerman did his look at which players had gained and lost sprint speed, he was among the guys who had lost the most sprint speed this past year, and it showed. But I think where he's going right now, it's a really nice risk reward, I think, because it's kind of like the risk isn't that high at 150, right? And because I'm not really concerned that he's not going to steal bases anymore, because that's kind of where, that's kind of what he is. The question is he going to develop that hit tool? So I think he's fine where he's going. I haven't managed to get him just because I've been a little bit more focused on, like, if I need speed, Leody Taveras, he's going, 20 to 40 picks after him. And I think in a similar profile, but he's batting leadoff. And so I think that's could be a huge difference in terms of the plate appearances that they get. And your one concern with Taveras is the batting average, but I think it's a similar concern that you have with Robles as well. And then I also think there's some speed guys, like Nick Solak is a guy that I'm actually digging a little bit more, which I guess he's probably in here, isn't he?
He should be.
Oh, yeah, he is. He's in the next group.
He's in
the next grouping.
Come on down.
Wow, look at that transition right there. So Robles is fine, but I do think that there's similar profiles that you can get later on. That may not be the case as we get to March. I think some of those guys are going to move up a little bit. Last one, Ryan Mountcastle, I have no interest in at all. I know folks are into him a little bit, but if you look at him, 333 batting average, but on a 398 BABIP. The hard hit rate wasn't great. The O swing wasn't that great. The contact rate wasn't that great. The StatCast data wasn't that great. Like, everything kind of wasn't that great. And he had a 398 BABIP that had him hitting 333. So, I think he needs to hit for a high batting average, which is certainly possible given, kind of what he did during the minor leagues. Steamer has him projected at like 277, so 277, 26 home runs, 70 runs, 82 RBIs. So fine. 3 stolen bases. But if he's not necessarily being a big helper, I feel like I'm talking to my 4 and my 7-year-old. Are you going to be a big helper today? Are you? If he's not going to be a big helper in those categories, right, in batting average or stolen bases, then I think there's other guys that are still here that I'm much more interested in. And that's not to say that development can't happen and he won't be really good. But so those are kind of the guys. I think in that group, Laureano is definitely the most interesting to me, just from a kind of cost benefit. I think Carlson, I would not be surprised to see Carlson as like a top 50 hitter, going into next year. I could definitely see something like that happening, but the price is starting to push up in the, early 100s range. And I anticipate that will be even further up when drafts come along.
Yeah, I'm with you. Start with Yaz. I like Yaz a lot. I think you pretty much know what you're going to get from Yaz, barring something crazy like Steady Eddie, 250 to 260, 25-ish homers. That's what he's going to do, because the offense around him is not great. So it's going to be tough to really help you a ton, and he's not going to run a lot. So that's something to keep in mind also. So I think he's a good ball player. I think he's legit. It's just a matter of, is he the fancy guy you're looking for in this range? And it's like Dylan Carlson can do what Yaz can do, but maybe better, because he'll steal some bags. And I like Carlson a lot. Played him in DFS a ton towards the end of the year because he was cheap, and they hit him 3rd or 4th in the lineup the last few weeks into the postseason. And he answered, like you said, when he got called back up, he hit around 275 with some pop, no steals. He had, I think, a 16% barrel rate and a 60% hard hit rate over that time. Like, he was seeing the ball and he was doing things we expected him to do. So I'm a big Dylan Carlson fan, hitting in the middle of that Cardinals lineup. There's a lot to like there, especially if he runs like he did in 2019 in the minors. Big upside there. I agree with everything you said with Laureano. I remember this time last year, we were literally comparing Pham and Laureano, like you said. Like, this is a young Tommy Pham, so why don't you take him a little later? Higher upside of Tommy Pham, stuff along those lines. So I'm with you. I think it's a good bounce back option there for Laureano. Victor Robles, I love at this price point. Last year we had to pay so much for him, and now you're getting him around pick 145-ish, 150, and I think that's an insane value. I agree. As we get closer to like the heart of draft season, you're going to see the price tag go up, because the price for steals always goes up later in draft season. And the one thing with Robles, if the hit tool doesn't come to be like you're saying, he's still going to run. And it was a couple years ago, in 2019, he still hit 255 with 17 homers, 28 steals, 86 runs, and 65 RBIs. That is a phenomenal player at that point in the draft, like a really good player. And Steamer thinks that's what he is: 16, 68, 65, 22, and 251. Like at pick 145, that is great. When we were doing it like a pick 55, that was a different story. But pick 150 right now, I can dig some Victor Robles at this point in time, especially. Like I wouldn't take a bunch of gamble guys. Like don't go getting Buxton and Robles, like all these pieces. But if you want to get like one of them to mix in there that has that good upside floor ceiling combination for you, I think Robles is a good one. One that I like a lot. And then Ryan Mountcastle, I like the kid. I like his tools. Like you mentioned, a lot of luck last year. So there's a lot of things I want to see. That Orioles team was fun offensively. They couldn't win a baseball game, but they had a lot of fun fantasy parts there, and Mountcastle was one of them. He'll be a fun asset throughout the season, but I can see some rough patches for the kid, and it get really rough. So I had no problem if you want to take him, but like I'd rather take Victor Robles, like a pick ahead of him, or some of these guys we're going to talk about in the next grouping. That I'd take probably all 5 of them over Ryan Mountcastle. So I like the kid. You're just paying for his name right now. You know, he should be going about 100 picks later, in my opinion, but he's not. So that's where I stand on that one.
Hey, Bubba, this is a first. I wonder if you can see it. Can you see the rolling average graph for Dylan Carlson?
Yes.
Look at this. You come here for the graphics. Look at that. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
The contact going up, ground ball rate going down, hard hit rate going up, O swing going down. That's what you live to see.
Yep.
That's what you live to see right there. For those of you on the podcast, I apologize. We just looked at a rolling average graph. That's why you should show up to the live stream.
Yep, it's fun. It's fun. Picks 41 or outfielders 41 through 45. Jorge Soler, Anthony Santander, Nick Solak, Michael Brantley, and Ian Happ. This is a group that I can see myself grabbing 1 or 2 from throughout the draft. So what are you seeing here?
Yeah, it's a group that I like a lot as well. I think with Soler, I'm not that interested just because I think power is the calling card. And his contact rate, last year, like he was down 4% this year. Obviously, small sample size. He was also hurt a little bit. So I think it's fine if you're just going like for a pure power perspective, which, honestly, there's nothing wrong with doing that at this point in time. So if you're down in power, he's a nice little addition, and that is a better lineup. It'll be interesting to see where they hit him. Witt first, Mondesi second, Perez third, Santana fourth, Soler fifth. That sound about right?
Santana and Soler probably they can flip flop at any time, but it's pretty close. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean that's it. That's intriguing. So I think it's really interesting. I just a lot of times I'm in drafts. I'm focused on other things other than power at this point in the draft. Sometimes to my detriment, but definitely solid. Santander is really interesting to me. I mean, because the plate discipline isn't there, but the contact is. The batted ball quality is improving. Everything looks really nice. I think he's just a really good hitter. And so I kind of like him, but at the same time, the speed's not really there at all. So he's not contributing that much. And so it's kind of a thing where it's like, yeah, he's going to have a better batting average, than maybe a Soler, but you believe in Soler's power a little bit more. Context for Soler maybe a little bit better too. And then, the speed is not, maybe 5 or 6 stolen bases, I think, from Santander. So I don't mind him. I thought about drafting him this last draft I was in. I just thought about it. If the guy who I wanted didn't go, I might have drafted him. So that's kind of where I am at him. But the guy that I did draft, it's actually not the next guy, but I'll talk about him next. The guy that I did draft was Michael Brantley. I just think Michael Brantley's so solid. I mean,
always underappreciated.
I mean, that batting average that he's giving you right there. I mean, take it, grab it, take it right there. And I think he'll move up a little bit. As drafts get there, but he always seems to be in like the, last year he's in the 135 range. So around 150 probably this year. I try to think about where he's going to end up. I can't see a non-contender going after him just because he's older and, I wouldn't be surprised to see him re-up with the Astros maybe. I mean, we talked about how bad their outfield looks. So maybe he's out there for a little bit. I mean, talk about a guy that would have been perfect for that, for the White Sox. But, so I wouldn't necessarily be surprised, especially if free agents aren't getting those really good deals. If you were to sign something similar to what Eaton signed, maybe with the Astros, maybe a little bit more. Obviously, defensively, I don't think he's great anymore. But I really like him. I mean, I love being able to think about, oh man, I have Michael Brantley. I can fill in right here to get that boost to me in batting average before I go when we get into the dregs of batting average, right? Where guys that we're looking at that we like are not really providing that, generally speaking. So really love Brantley at all. And ahead of that is Nick Solak. I've never really been into Nick Solak, but then I dive into the profile and it's very enjoyable, in the sense that he makes a ton of contact. He's had good discipline in the past, not great this past year, but solid enough, but he makes a ton of contact. So he's going to put a lot of balls in play. The ground ball rate is too high. The power is not really there. He doesn't have a lot of really good quality of contact metrics. He's projected, I think, for 17 or 18 home runs, which seems reasonable. And then the stolen bases might seem a little light. I mean, I think they're projecting him for, what are they projecting him for? I should remember this because I've been looking at his profile. Steamer has him projected for 9 stolen bases. But he already has 9 in 368 plate appearances. I think the Rangers are going to be super aggressive on the base paths, right? They have no reason not to be. They're going to need to generate offense. They're going to have Leody Taveras. They're going to have Kinner Falefa. They're going to have Solak. So I think they're going to steal bases. So I think that's a little bit light. And so when you start to think about a guy who has a pretty decent batting average floor, and I think a really good season if luck rolls his way, or maybe he hits a few more line drives than he normally does. He also improved the launch angle as the season progressed. Ground ball rate fell. Actually, I think the ground ball rate was relatively similar, but the launch angle increased dramatically over his last little bit. So that was really nice to see. So I think it's just a really kind of nice Tommy Edman-ish profile, and you're getting it later on. And if you miss out on Brantley, then he's also a plus batting average guy, Solak is. And so I think you can go with him. He's got second base eligibility in outfield. I wouldn't be surprised to see him add third base eligibility at some point this year as well. So he's a guy that's grown on me a decent amount. And I do like him a lot. Ian Happ, I think, is another good example. Is a good example for me of a guy who you drafted last year because he was going at ADP 250 or more. And because he didn't need to provide you with much to get there. But now all of a sudden, he's going around pick, 160-ish, 150-ish. And I'm just not into it. It's not a great batting average profile. Stolen bases, it's been a bit, he had decent stolen bases in 17 and 18. But in his last, 400 plate appearances, he has 3 stolen bases. The last couple years, the strikeout rate is still an issue. We saw that contact rate jump up in the small sample size in 2019. It crashed down to earth, 66.5%. I think those of us who had him on our team last year, we were very aware that he fell off a cliff, in that second half there after starting off really hot. So I just don't see anything to love there, right? Like, we're going to talk to you about him in a second, and we've already mentioned it, but why on earth are you drafting him ahead of Kutch at this point? You know what I'm saying? There's no reason. There's zero reason to do that. Don't do it.
Don't be that person. It's an interesting range. I like Soler, but empty bat. Well, his batting average is about 250, 260. He's not empty, but he's not going to steal you a lot of bases. So it just kind of depends. Are you already starting to target certain? Are you really low on power? Okay, maybe go take a chance on Soler here. I could see that being an option. He should be able to drive in a lot of runs, like you mentioned. So that could be a big plus in that improved lineup. Anthony Santander is a guy I really like. I'm surprised every time I see his ADP this high. He's a guy I even wrote up last year as a post 250 or 300 guy to target in drafts, and now that's not going to be the case. But doesn't steal, as you mentioned. That's the biggest bugaboo, and that's why I'm kind of surprised he's going this high. The rest of the tools are great. Switch hitter, hits the ball very well, power, okay average. Like I like Santander a lot. I don't mind taking him if you're good on steals. I think he'll bring you a steady production to your lineup that you will appreciate at this point in the draft. You mentioned Brantley. He's literally a guy you can just plug in and never worry about. Like it's perfect. Like you mentioned, the batting average that Michael Brantley relief he brings to your lineup is huge. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So hopefully he gets in a nice spot. And with the Astros, he was hitting third, which is outstanding. So maybe he can find a spot. Probably not that nice, but hey, you never know. Like you said, maybe he goes back to Houston. I like Nick Solak a lot. I'm with you 100% on the fact that I think the stolen bases are much lower than should be expected. And you mentioned the launch angle improvement, and the ground ball rate dropped 4%, not much, but the fly ball rate rose like 13%, or 12%. So he's starting to elevate the ball a lot more. His overall solid contact went up, even though his barrel rate went down. So it's just a combination. I keep putting things together a little more. He's still super young, big time. He's 25 years old. He was a very talented prospect in the Rays system. They had to trade him, just like the Nate Lowe situation all over again. Maybe we should start calling the Rangers Texas, the Rays like Plan B or something. I don't know, but I do like Solak quite a bit, especially at second base. If you're not using him in the outfield, I think there's a big upgrade at second base. I like the comparison to Tommy Edman light. I think it's a good comparison there. Then Ian Happ I like a lot. Like I understand his batting average is a drain, and there's a lot of questions about how he finished the season. But I guess for me, we're getting a guy leading off for the Cubs, a team that completely underperformed last year, that I don't see underperforming again to that level this year. So now you got the leadoff hitter for the Cubs. They should run more, hopefully, this season. Is David Ross. Maybe that's his philosophy. He's not going to. Maybe it's a shortened season where they just couldn't get anything going, so he didn't run. I don't know. But the lack of steals is a little troublesome. It's still, over 10% barrel rate, 48% hard hit rate was the best of his career last year. Struck out 2% more to 27%, but walked up to 13% last year. His OBP has been outstanding pretty much every season. He's been in the big, so he gets on base. He's going to score runs in that offense. He's got some really good pop. I like Happ. Yes, there are red flags that you mentioned. I'm not going to disagree with that at all. But he doesn't chase. He stays in the zone quite a bit, which I like to see from a young hitter. So he's being conscientious there. Probably leads to more walks, as we see. Ground ball rate's not ideal. The fly ball rate drops 11% last year. But you mentioned that with his overall quality of contact dropping as well. So I'm going to kind of notch him up. If you want to get some of that Cubs offense that I do think rebounds, he's a nice value because even Rizzo's fallen, Baez is falling. We talked about all these guys we like. Why wouldn't we like the leadoff hitter that hits in front of those guys? I think that's something that gets my attention. So Ian Happ is a guy I don't mention at this point in the draft. Yeah, 30 homers, 9 steals, like they're saying in the projections, is something I can definitely get behind from Happ, including all the runs he'll score. So I like him quite a bit at ADP 166. So I'll jump all over that one. All right, 46 to 50. We got Dalton Varsho, who we talked about at the catcher position. He's got a value there. Joey Gallo, who's falling like crazy. Clint Frazier, Victor Reyes, and Max Kepler. This is a grouping I won't see myself taking many of. But what do you like here?
Yeah, we're getting into territory where I'm always taking pitchers. So I don't even know these guys. No, I mean, Varsho, you're drafting him as a catcher. I mean, if you're drafting him as an outfielder, I don't know what to tell you. Just don't do it. Yeah. You're drafting him for a catcher. I mean, it's nice that he has the dual position eligibility because if you have two amazing catchers, then you can plug him in the outfield. But again, I think for Varsho, you want him as a catcher. Gallo, it's the same story. I think different year, right? Batting average concerns. If you're in an overall competition, it's very, very hard, to add Gallo. His projections now are finally kind of catching up. I think they've always projected him for a little bit of a higher batting average, but in the last 4 seasons, and obviously these aren't the same sample size for all of them, but 209, 206, 253, 181. And the major difference is that in one of those years he had a 368 BABIP, right? So he's kind of the guy we know he is, and you can't really have that profile if you're in an overall competition, which is generally the perspective that I'm thinking about these. But certainly if you're going to pump batting average or something like that, you can certainly do it. And then in OBP leagues, he's so much more valuable in OBP leagues. So don't be as worried about pulling the trigger there. For Clint Frazier, I don't really like it that much. I mean, he's obviously with the Yankees, but I'm just going to make sure that I'm remembering this right because I'm going off of memory. But I think his batted ball quality is pretty poor. Yeah, so let's see. Hard hit rate 31.8%. You look at his, exit velocities around league average, max exit velos, nothing to write home about. Barrel rate is decent. Hard hit rate's good. So he's all right, but I just don't I don't think he does anything particularly good. And except for maybe the plate discipline, contact skills a little bit down. So he's kind of meh. It's kind of like one of these questions where you're like, if he wasn't on the Yankees, like where would he be going? And it's probably like 50 to 100 spots later. And it's not like we should be agnostic of the or I don't know, agnostic is the right word there, but we should be, well, whatever, about what his context is, right? That matters where he's going to be at. But there's nothing in the profile that really catches me. Not great batting average, not really stealing a bunch of bases, not really hitting for a ton of power. So I think it's fine to pass up here. I think with Victor Reyes is really interesting to me, from like a speed perspective, speed, power, batting average guy with the Tigers. I haven't gotten him at all. I've been more interested in Leody Taveras because I think Taveras has some pretty interesting power potential that I don't necessarily think Reyes does, but Reyes also makes a bunch more contact. I think he was playing every day towards the end of the year, Victor Reyes, but I believe being platooned early on in the season. And so, I guess I should probably look that up because that's why people listen to the program.
He was leading off towards the end of the season, playing every day.
He was leading off and playing every day. Does he have? I'm just checking out if he has what his splits look like. Yeah, I mean he has got a higher batting average versus lefties.
He's a switch hitter.
Brutal though. WRC his WRC plus is 82 from the left and 78 from the right.
He's not a power bat.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. But again, interesting just from a batting average, stolen bases, and if he leads off in that lineup every day, I think that's a really interesting combination. So, if you're looking for speed, I find myself oftentimes, like I mentioned, you got kind of Robles there, you got Taveras there, you got Solak there, you got Victor Reyes there. So some interesting kind of speed opportunities if you miss out early on, and you could even double tap those, right? I mean, that's about 30 projected stolen bases there in a short period of time. We also have Lorenzo Cain, who I don't know if he's on the outline, but he didn't quite make the outline.
He just missed.
Yeah, he just missed. And then Max Kepler is kind of Max Kepler, right? He's not going to have a high batting average. He's going to hit a decent amount of home runs. He's going to score decent amount of runs, decent amount of RBI, and he's going to steal a little bit. And that's kind of what he is, what he's always been. I think there's definitely a pretty low average floor for him, just because of the batted ball profile. Hits a ton of fly balls. So if they're not going out for home runs, they're probably just outs. So again, not somebody that I've necessarily targeted at all. I think this is a really nice spot in the draft for some pitching and some closers. So again, like just strategically, I have not been focused on the hitters right here. But of this group, I would say Reyes is the most interesting if you're looking for that speed, and then Varsho at catcher. But all the other guys, I think, are not special. No,
yeah, as much as I like the last region, like I agree with you. It's we raved about Varsho as a potential just beast catcher, but in the outfield he's like whatever. Like there's many guys like him or better than him in the outfield, but as a catcher, amazing at this point in the draft. He has like tremendous potential. So yeah, don't take him as an outfield, like you said. If you're playing him in the outfield, you better have one really weird, talented roster to make that fit. Joey Gallo, I will not have anything to do with. Not a chance at all. Clint Frazier, I agree. The overall approach has been odd, but something about batting sixth with the Yankees, it's like batting sixth for the Rockies. It really is. I'm not saying it's not Coors Field, and it's not making me go like I don't have any shares of Clint Frazier anywhere, but I see the appeal to it because the question with him has always been everyday at bats. And once he started getting regular at bats last year, we saw big power numbers. We saw some really good production. Like it wasn't great. He had a bunch of like 0 for games. We're like, what in the world? but the overall stat line at the end was very fantasy relevant. So I see that appeal, and that's the beauty of playing in a lineup like that, where you're going to see a Yankees team score 8, 9, 10 runs a lot. And so if he just shows up those days, they're sitting pretty. And I could see that happening. So I don't hate people taking him there. I don't have any shares of him because I'm like you, where I'm taking pitching or some of these other guys around him. But I see the appeal to Clint Frazier, where he's one of those guys like we used to talk about Javi Baez and some other guys where the aggressiveness or this or that was like, yeah, it's kind of scary, but they somehow keep getting it done. Clint Frazier is going to put up kind of what he's doing now, where he kind of deserves to be in this range of outfielder. So I got no problem with that. And he'll run more than I think he did last year. That's another thing as well. Victor Reyes, I love. I don't like the fact he's going this high in drafts. That really bums me out. I picked him up in so many deep leagues last year. I had him in a lot of lineups. And that might not be something to be proud of, but he steals bases. He gets on a ton because of that contact you mentioned, and he scores a lot of runs. He's not going to hit you for much power, but he gets a lot. He was a doubles and triples machine. So if you're in like certain weird points leagues, he's got some really sneaky value. He really does. He just doesn't have the power yet, and maybe he develops that. He's still super young. So it's something to keep an eye on with Victor Reyes. I wouldn't like hold my breath for that. He's like another Victor Robles, like you said, or I like the Leody Tavares to Tom. I agree. Tavares probably more power. Reyes definitely more batting average, but both have very good approaches. And I like your other comparison. You know, we mentioned Buxton, Solak, Robles, Pham, Laurel, all these steals guys. So say you don't get one of the big shortstops early or one of those guys early on, and you go pocket aces, and then you get a Real Muto, and then you get some other guys that don't steal a ton. This is a great way to add up steals in a hurry. So, and they're not flashy, but you don't have to worry about it because you already got power early, stuff like that. It's the way it's roster construction, not does this guy really fit at this point in the draft? Does he fit for my team? And I think guys like Victor Reyes actually do. The price tag is tough to stomach, but at pick 180, what he can bring to he's like a lighter Michael Brantley that steals more. That's what I'd like. He's very boring. Like you plug him in your lineup because he's leading off and he'll produce by the end of the week. That's just what he does. So I like Victor Reyes quite a bit. And then Max Kepler, I love Max Kepler. We love Max Kepler, but he's Max Kepler. You said it really well. Yeah, he's going to get you 25-ish homers, hit for like a 245 average, and not run a ton. Like that's what Max Kepler does. So and that lineup, no Rosario, maybe no Cruz. Like it's still a very good lineup. It's not quite what it once was. So keep that in mind with Minnesota. That's going to be really interesting to see where they go there. All right, 51-55. Randall Grichuk, Jurickson Profar, Kyle Schwarber, Trey Mancini, and Leody Tavares. What about this range?
Yeah, I mean, this range is an interesting one. I like Grichuk a lot more when he's going in like the mid to late 200s than he is right here. He obviously had a really good season. I don't fully buy it though. Like there was an increase in contact rate that he had, but also an increase in ground ball rate. The batted ball quality metrics were fine, but I just don't see the batting average holding. I think he's kind of the same guy that he was. Maybe if he keeps the contact, gains. And remember, he was hitting only against, the East pitching, which was the worst, across the board. I just wonder. He had the highest home run per fly ball rate of his career as well, probably playing, in Buffalo. So I don't buy him as being a different player now than he was before. And what he's always been is, a late power guy, but it's not as late. And I think I like the profiles of guys around this spot a little bit more. And so I don't find myself going there because I think the batting average floor still remains pretty low on Grichuk. Profar is interesting. Obviously depends on where he ends up, but the batting average is never going to be super helpful, I don't think, with him. This was the best that he's had, 238 batting average over 2,000 plus plate appearances. The quality of contact was pretty decent, but the kind of power speed combo, I think, is what is the most intriguing about him. And I don't know if he's been consistent enough for me to really grab him right here, but certainly an interesting profile that has a lot of ways to succeed if he's in the right place and if he can find a little bit more consistency. I think Schwarber's the guy that I like the most out of this group. because I think he's the same guy. I think it's a similar conversation to the one with Laureano, right? Where we were all in on him last year and then nothing changed all that much. I mean, Schwarber, yeah, he hit 188, which sucks. His ground ball rate went up a bunch, which kind of is lame. But the hard hit rate is the same. Contact rate was the same. So that 29.5% strikeout rate really doesn't make sense with his contact rate at close to 74%. I mean, to frame it a different way, he's slightly below league average in overall contact rate, and yet he's got close to a 30% strikeout rate. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's small sample size stuff for me. When you look at the quality of the batted ball, the exit velocity is still elite. The max exit velo wasn't what it was in 18 or 19, but there's no reason at age 27 that he's all of a sudden, not going to hit as hard. Barrel rate was still above 10%, 11.2%, hard hit rate at 47.2%. So a lot of the quality of contact metrics were all really, really good. If you look at his rolling average graphs too, he has these periods of time where the ground ball rate goes up, and then it comes down. It's just the way that things happen. So I think he got a really crappy start to the season where nobody in that lineup really got going. And I think he's going to mash wherever he ends up. And so I'd much rather grab a Schwarber. Like, I believe Schwarber can actually be a very good hitter. I don't believe the same thing about Randall Grichuk. And so for me, I think Schwarber is the guy. And again, it depends on where he ends up. But as long as he's going to be in the lineup every day, I absolutely love Schwarber where he's going right now. And then Trey Mancini, the only thing with Mancini is the health, right? He's been gone for a year. That's the major question, but we saw what he was capable of 2 years ago. And that was really nice. I mean, it's high batting average, it's power. It's nice. And the Orioles lineup is better now. It's 2 years on from that. And, it's a stronger lineup. So I have not grabbed any Trey Boo yet. I'm sorry, Bubba. I hope you're not disappointed in me yet, but maybe there will be that time that I do. I think I love the speed guys that are going around here. So I oftentimes find myself hunting for speed in this area of the draft. And if I'm not hunting for speed, then I'm looking for power with a guy like Schwarber, something of that nature. Yeah. And then Leody Taveras is a guy that I really like a lot. I don't know if Smada is still on here, but he's I think the future for them, in center field. So they're going to give him a nice run. He's going to steal a lot of bases. He's really fast. And the power is a little bit surprising. I mean, 6.5% barrel rate. So not tremendous, but decent enough. Max exit velo around 108 miles per hour. Right around league average exit velocity, but he's shown in some of his minor league career that there might be a little bit more in the bat right there. His strikeout rate was 32%, but the overall contact rate was just slightly below, maybe 4 to 5% below league average. But not a 32% K rate type stuff. And then his plate discipline is decent, and I think it's been decent throughout his minor league career. Yeah, 8% walk rate, 9% walk rate, 11% walk rate. So, again, I just really like the profile. I think he's going to get a ton of plate appearances, and I think he's going to steal a ton of bases, and I think he's going to hit, the Steamer's projecting him for 13 home runs and 22 stolen bases with a 245 batting average and 584 plate appearances. So if he gets up, if he stays healthy and he plays every day, in that leadoff spot, you're looking at potentially up to 650 plate appearances. And then you're talking about a 15 and 25 guy instead, which I think at this point in the draft is really valuable. And I do think that there's upside. I think that there's, I think it can work. I think it could work really good for him. So those are the guys. I mean, I've been drafting Taveras and Schwarber. Those have been kind of my outfielders that I'm drafting at this point in the draft. Yeah.
There seems to be a trend with guys that we like and we just can't quit because they become values again this year. Like Schwarber, we were all over last year. I could pick 150-ish or something like that. Now he's going almost 50 picks later. It's like, how do you – like you said, nothing really changed. And, again, the Cubs had a bad year. Like, it's just one of those things I kind of I kind of notch up. I agree. He's also a better hitter. Like everyone said that. They kind of wonder if part of his hitting struggle has been his trying to play defense. Like it's taken away from his focus at the plate. Now if he can go sign and be a DH somewhere, he's built to be a DH. Like that's what he's supposed to do. So yeah, I love Schwarber. I know I skipped ahead there, but I think that's a phenomenal value at that point in the draft, and he should be going up later in the year. Which I think, honestly, I'd have to look back. I want to say about this point last year, he was going to pick 200 or so, and then the steam started coming towards the end of draft season. So that might happen again once he signs somewhere. Gritchick, I agree.
Schwarber.
Yeah,
he ended up going at like 120 to
he kept climbing up towards the end there. Gritchick, I agree, is too steep for my price tag. The average, got to do it more than once for me to believe that's a thing. We knew who he was before last year, but I think we're paying that premium. The baby Blue Jays, the offense they produce, playing in Buffalo, we see all their guys are going up in drafts. So maybe if you want the baby Blue Jays, you got to pay for them this year. That's something to think about. I like Profar a lot if I knew where he was playing. I think there's a lot of upside there with him. He can help you a little bit in all 5 categories. I think there is a lot to like there with him. And I agree with you on Tavares. I think he's great. He's another guy. It seems like in each region here, we have another 20-plus steal potential guy that you're going to get here, which is good as you're going through your draft. And that's kind of the point of these podcasts is to go, okay, if I need steals, I got guys here. Who can I go for? I mean, and Tavares is a great later round pick, like a really good one. And like you said, it's a Rangers team that they're going young, they're rebuilding. He's going to have a lot of playing time, a lot of leash is not the word we should use, but that's what it is. Like they're going to let him have a lot of leeway at the top of that order. So that's a very nice spot there. And then Trey Boo Boo, I saved him for last. I love Trey. I don't have any shares of Trey right now either. I just have so many questions about the health. Like I'm not saying he's not healthy. Obviously, that's all good. That's awesome. That's great. But a year removed, going through all those treatments, I wouldn't be shocked if he has a great year. Like I kind of want to see him in spring training. I really do. Let me see him go out there and play some baseball. I might have some towards the end. The talent's there. If he's anywhere close to where he was before all this, it's going to be great because that Orioles lineup is a lot better. So I'm all in on that. But I'm kind of hesitant, especially when you got Schwarber and Tavares right there. I probably don't have any Mancini as well. All right, the last 5 we're doing tonight, 56 to 60, McCutchen, J.D. Davis, Jesse Winker, Jared Kalenic, and Austin Hayes.
Yeah, I mean, I love McCutchen. McCutchen is kind of he's like the end of it for me. He's like, after McCutchen goes, I'm not all that interested in the outfielders for a little bit. I'm interested in some of the deeper ones, but Kutch is just he's so steady. The skills are steady. The production is steady. I wasn't on him last year just because of the injury, and I was worried about how he was going to respond, but 10 home runs, 4 stolen bases, and 250 plate appearances. I mean, he seems like he seems 2010, seems like it's good. I feel like he's just like 250, 20, 10, and then the runs could be off the charts. I mean, his O swing went up a little bit, but it's still borderline elite at 25% last year, hitting at the front of that Phillies lineup, which may not be as good, but is still going to be good. With him, if JTR doesn't re-sign there, but I think that may end up happening when all is said and done. You look at the Steamer projection, 246 with 26 home runs, 87 runs, 70 RBI, 9 stolen bases. And I think the thing that I really like about him a lot, and I think we don't talk about this a lot, or maybe, I don't know, I feel like we haven't talked about it that much, but runs are hard to come by in drafts later on too, right? Because the better the hitters, the further up in the batting order they hit. And so it's really hard to get some really solid run contributors later in drafts. And I think McCutchen is going to get you a ton of runs. If he's healthy, he's going to score a ton of runs. And that's going to be nice. You're going to really like that. And so I think he's phenomenal going where he's going right now. I just absolutely love where he's going. JD Davis. I mean, I think JD Davis is fine. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't read too much into this past year. I was looking into his profile earlier this week. So yeah, no, there wasn't any type of dramatic change. The hard hit rate went down a little bit. Not the 355 BABIP, but he's always had really strong batted ball quality. So the exit velocity over 90 miles per hour. So solid, not quite as good as 2019. The barrel rate, similar to 2019. Hard hit rate similar to 2019. I think the issue was the ground balls. Up at 56.3%. So that was a major thing. But again, over small sample sizes, the batted ball stuff can be noisy because, you're not putting a ball in play on every single time you're up. So you take out the walks, you take out the strikeouts, and then all your batted balls, and the small sample size is just a lot smaller. He does traditionally have a higher ground ball rate, 50.6% for his career. But, a 6% drop down to that 50% mark for JD Davis would do a tremendous amount of good for the power potential. So I still think I think he's fine. I haven't been grabbing him, but I think he's fine. Winker, again, I think is fine. I know he was much better last year from a batted ball perspective. I know he struggled a little bit, in the second half after just being blazing for like a week or two there. But I do, I don't know. I have no shares of Winker. Again, I don't know. Am I wrong here? I used to love Jesse Winker so much.
I love Jesse Winker. It's just like they got him penciled into play, and he played 54 games last year, which I thought was more than I expected. It seemed like they were always platooning him, and that's the question with Winker. Like he's a great ball player, and he's an OBP dream, but I don't know. There's so much turmoil in that team right now. I kind of want to see how things settle before I go taking chances on Jesse Winker.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an interesting profile. He sold out. He sold out for in OBP. Obviously, it's better, but he sold out for power, and it happened. But then you lose. When he was coming up, I was like, man, this guy, he's like the mini Joey Votto. But he just hasn't been able to put it together. He's not going to steal bases for you. The platoon issues, like you mentioned. Just not that into it. Kalenic could be great. He could be the prospect that comes up this year and really just absolutely excels. But, again, I don't like getting him. I never invest in the prospects.
Yeah.
So don't listen to anything I have to say, but he's got power. He's got speed. I think the batting average, at least at the major league level initially, is a little bit suspect. I don't know when they're going to bring him up either. So I just hesitate to put this type of to spend this type of draft capital on a guy that I'm not quite sure is going to play. But he could be really good. But I just think that there's other guys who can provide kind of a similar profile going this. I mean, even Austin Hayes, right? Like kind of power, not power speed, but projected for 22 home runs, 11 stolen bases, and 530 plate appearances with pretty decent batting average. The contact rate was really nice. The batted ball quality is the stuff that's pretty suspect for him. But he's making it work, and maybe that's a factor of Camden. Actually, that'd be really interesting. I should check that out. Did he hit like all his home runs at home? I bet he did.
We go to that fancy baseball savant, and it'll tell you how many homers would have counted.
No, I'm totally wrong. In your face, Toby. Three away, one on the road. Yeah, I mean, Austin Hayes is definitely interesting. I haven't drafted him yet, but I mean, if you think about it, like the numbers are pretty similar to Kutch, but because Kutch is great at OBP, he'll score a lot more runs, and I think he's in a better lineup. But a nice little maybe consolation prize there if you miss out on some of those other guys. So yeah.
The moral of the story is draft Andrew McCutchen, because this is one of those price tag things that makes 0 cents at all. Like you mentioned, runs a leadoff hitter on an offense like the Phillies at this point in the draft is crazy. He brings power, he brings some speed, brings a good average. He doesn't really hurt you at all. As long as he's on the field, he's going to help your team out. So I love Kutch. That I got him in a lot of places, wherever he's on a lot of teams. JD Davis, he hits the ball really, really hard, and people love him for that. But when it's on the ground, and like you said, it's tough to be a fantasy asset at that point in time. So show me some improvements. We'll talk there. I like we mentioned Winker. I like him a lot. There's just a lot of question marks. Jared Kalinick, the talent's legit. I'm no prospect analyst, but I've read a lot of stuff on him. I'm excited to watch him play. You see the videos, like he is very, very good. But you mentioned a couple things. When's he going to play? He was supposed to play last year. That didn't happen. We have Rodriguez there. We have, the reigning rookie of the years there. Like there's a lot of guys in the way. Dylan Moore might play the outfield. There's a lot of guys in the way that might make them wait a few more days to get that extra little time for Mr. Kalinick. So that's something to keep in mind there as well. And I usually don't draft prospects either. And then lastly, I love Austin Hayes. This is a guy I was raving about going into last season. He kind of had an up and down run of it. Expected to lead off. You mentioned the 22-11, which I think is great at that point in the draft. Decent batting average. He's another guy that'll score some runs for you because the O's will put up runs. They will. Their pitching is atrocious. Then that's why they lose games. But they will put up runs, especially in Camden Yards. So, and playing in Buffalo. And like the East is a very friendly place outside of like Tampa. So like it is a good spot for Austin Hayes. I like him quite a bit at this point in the draft. If you're missing some pieces there, or maybe you missed Tavares or Robles or some of those guys, Austin Hayes is a nice fallback for a little bit of steals and a little bit of everything. So I like that quite a bit at that point in the draft. All right, 60 outfielders in the books. Let's get to some listener questions, and we'll wrap up outfield preview part 2. And we got a lot of listener questions because you guys are awesome like that. We had a couple left over from last week, and I'll start with Zach Roto. Asks, last year I liked a lot of post 250 guys: Grisham, Lewis, Hilliard, Winker, Happ. You like Teoscar, Myers, that he recalls. I don't really see any this year that I like after 200. Do you? And if not, does this alter your draft strategy? So we kind of mentioned a few, but you want to recap a couple of the post 200s that you're liking?
Yeah, I'll take this. Do we have a question later on that goes like real deep into outfield?
I think so. Yeah,
we do. After guys that I like after 200, pick 200. We talked about Kutch. I like Lorenzo Cain. I mean, his ADP right now in the last little bit is 237. And he missed last year, but that could be good for him because he was struggling with a thumb injury. He was struggling, I think, with a knee injury in 2019. And so maybe he comes back and maybe it helps him defy a little bit of the age curve when it comes to his speed. He still had great contact skills. He still had decent plate discipline, in the last season. He actually had improved batted ball quality metrics. So, Cain could definitely be a huge steal too, because he could hit at the top of that Brewers lineup as well. So I like Cain a lot. I like Brian Reynolds. I won't go too deep because I got a few guys that I like super deep that we'll cover in the next question. I like Brian Reynolds again, another guy where the results were awful, but when you look under the hood, when you look at, the skills and everything, there's actually potentially some growth there with the batted ball quality with Brian Reynolds, increased barrel percentage. And so I think he's really good. And we talked about Michael Brantley being like that batting average kind of anchor guy. I think if you're looking for a batting average anchor later on, it's kind of funny to say for a guy who hit whatever he hit, like 180 something. But I really think that Brian Reynolds could be that for teams next year. And then the last guy I'll mention is Mark Canha. I just think he's like all around solid, good, really strong plate discipline, good contact skills. Batted ball quality isn't elite, but is good enough. He's hitting in the middle of that lineup. He plays every day now. I just think he's really good and underrated. So those are some of the post 200 guys that I like heading into this year.
Yeah, I like a lot of those guys. Kutch for sure. We mentioned our love there. I like Austin Hayes quite a bit. I like Manny Margot. There's supposed to be no platoon for him right now in Tampa. Hitting the middle of that order. He's got some massive steals upside. So I like some Margot at pick 250. We mentioned the love for Brantley. If you want another batting average asset, batting cleanup for the D-backs is David Peralta at pick 270. He brings a ton of batting average upside that later in the draft. So I think he's very interesting. This whole range of Peralta, Tapia, Hicks, and Cole Calhoun, is a range I see a lot of potential. That really has my attention later in drafts. Yeah, I love the Canha call. Yeah, and there's others we will talk about later that I see his names mentioned. So those are some I would definitely circle if you're looking for some more action. It just shows how deep outfield is. You can fill in some spots much later in drafts. And we talked about Mark Kana and Mr. Cupferly from the I'm sorry, it's totally blanked.
FTN.
Yeah, FTN. There it is. Thank you. FTN Fantasy. He has outfield part 2 question. In the post 200 world, why do we keep sleeping on a guy like Mark Kana? I understand the park factor stinks, but beautiful walk rate with the back-to-back 13 percentage plus seasons, chips in and steals, pair with solid hard hit and barrel rate, should bat middle in A's lineup. Thoughts? I know we both like him. Do you have any more thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I forgot that we had this question. Absolutely. I think Matt's right on. I think Kana's a great value going here. I think the only question is what exactly are you looking for? He might be a guy who suffers a little bit because he doesn't do anything great. He's just kind of all around solid. So generally when I'm going into these drafts, it's kind of like I'm going into this spot in the draft and I know what my weaknesses are, and those are probably power and maybe a little bit of speed. So maybe I'm looking for a little bit more upside on the power. Maybe I'm looking for a little bit more speed, but all around just solid, really solid contributor. And I think that's one of the differences, like in draft and holds, when I go into them strategically, I'm keenly aware of what I'm weak on, because it's not like fab where I can grind out the fab that way. Like I need to have those profiles. So oftentimes it's like, oh, dang, I'm clearly weak on power. And so the guys that are taking up my bench are going to need to be power guys. And Kana actually fits into that, but it may be a situation where I'm like, okay, I'm going to grab my last batting average guy here in Brian Reynolds, and then I'm going to load up on power afterwards and maybe hope that I can luck into some of the other things that he provides. But no, I think he's absolutely right. He's great.
Yeah, no, he's awesome. There's no reason not to like him. So jump on the Mark Kana bandwagon. Steve Brunn asks, your favorite speed target in the outfield if you see your light on bags? We mentioned a lot of speed targets, which is fun. Is Tavares your favorite?
Yeah, I really like Tavares in that spot. I've got a little bit of Tavares. One guy who a couple other guys, Lorenzo Cain, is another one where if you're short on speed, it may be interesting to look at him. I think Raimel Tapia is actually really interesting, because it looks like he's going to get center field there. You're going to have to compensate for the power. But a lot of times what I think about with these later guys that are speed guys is like, they're a good piece to have on your bench when you either have a really bad matchup with one of your other outfielders, or they have a really good matchup, or somebody gets injured. So you're not necessarily having them in the lineup all the time so that home run and RBI totals really drag you down, but you're kind of using them selectively. Kevin Kiermaier is always available late for some reason. He always goes super late in drafts. And the good thing about him is he's very solidly in that platoon with Tampa, and he's so good defensively that makes you that gives you a good understanding of what you're getting and when you can use him and when you're not going to be able to use him heading into a series. So if you have either a daily or kind of bi-weekly like you do in NFBC, I think there are opportunities to kind of weigh in there with him. So those are some of the later guys. There's guys like Oscar Mercado going really late. There's some interesting kind of Roman Quinn, is another one who's really nice to have on your bench. So that's kind of the way that I've approached it in different drafts, depending on how light on speed I was.
No, I agree with a lot of that. We mentioned a ton of guys that I like in the speed department, so you can mix and match and make all that fun stuff happen as well. The next question we have here is from Dave Swan at the Vithius. He asks, who is this year's Trent Grisham? That's a popular question going around right now. So for me, you just mentioned him, and the power is the issue where people might say he's not the next Trent Grisham because it's not great. 56% ground ball rate to a 15% fly ball rate, pulls the ball 17% of the time. Those aren't ideal. Barrel rate below 3%, a hard hit rate of 30%, but everything else I love, and that's where I melt Tapia, like you mentioned. I think there is big time upside there. If he finds just a little bit of power and sneaks in like 15 homers, that'd be awesome. Steamer's got him for 10 and 15, 277. He's going to lead off for the Rockies, half your games in Coors Field. I think there's a lot to like there with Tapia. He ran pretty well towards the end of last season. You get him every day at bats there in Coors. I'm going to say past, like, I think the whole point of the question is past, like, pick 250. Who is the next guy, like Trent Grisham? I'm going Raimel Tapia. Who is a guy that you see doing that?
I mean, how much like Trent Grisham do they need to be? Do they need to have?
I think it's just a guy that, I think the idea is just a guy that can rise up the fantasy rankings like Trent Grisham did.
Guy who can rise up the fantasy rankings like Trent Grisham did. I'll throw this guy out there. He's going late. I think he's very risky, but I love him this year. Gregory Polanco is a guy that I absolutely love this year. He did some amazing things in a small sample size last year from a batted ball quality perspective. Now, the batting average tanked and the contact rate tanked. They were all god awful. I mean, he had a 37.4% strikeout rate. So horrible stuff there. But if you look at the rolling average graph, that improved, not to something that we really like, but to good enough. I think he was like overall around 68% or something like that in his last 20 games. So small sample size again. But, I mean, 92.9 mile per hour average exit velocity. His career is 89.2. Highest max exit velocity since 2015. Highest barrel rate of his career at 12.5%. Again, we're dealing with a small sample size and these things can happen. Hard hit rate was 51%. StatCast hard hit rate was 51%. So absolutely destroying the ball. And I mean, in 174 plate appearances, he hit 7 home runs. He still stole 3 bases. He hit 153, so you can ignore that piece of the equation. But I just think, like, if you talk about a guy who, if he can stay healthy and he can put it all together, maybe he hits 250, hits you 30 home runs and 10 stolen bases. Again, that's like way up there in terms of the percentiles, but he's the type of guy where if he can stay healthy, which is a huge question mark for him, I think he's going to be a big fantasy contributor. And at the cost right now, which is like 360 or something like that. What is it? 381 ADP, sign me up for that. So that's a guy. And then I'll say, stay the hell away from him next year when he's going really high, up there.
Don't pay the premium. At JW the Gamer asked, did Roman Quinn earn any more playing time with his 12 steals in 2020? OPS was not ideal, but lots of statistical oddities in the 60-game season. I know you were on him late in Fab Leagues for the steals. I've been grabbing him late in drafts right now for like best ball and draft and holds for the steals appeal. But he's still, I don't know, he's still kind of platooning right now, it looks like. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he's fine. I think he's platooning. I don't think he's a good baseball player, which is a bummer. So I think he's a guy that if you draft him, you're not planning on playing him all the time. You're kind of playing him in matchups or when guys get injured, type of thing. But he is, I mean, from just like a per plate appearance basis, he's probably the number one speed guy. For me, I mean, how many bases did he steal last year? He stole 12 bases and 116 plate appearances. So 1 stolen base every 10 plate appearances is pretty ridiculously good. So yeah, I really like Quinn. If you're really tough on stolen bases, especially in like a DC, adding him and being able to kind of move him in when you can, I think is great.
Yeah, no, I like it quite a bit. Craig Schumann asks us, is Jared Walsh legit? What's a realistic full season projection? I know we talked about him on the first base pod. He's going around pick 177 right now. Should get everyday bats for now. I think he's good. 20 to 25 homers, probably maybe runs hotter than that. But, he ran really, really well last year. So I'd leave a little bit of trepidation there. What's your thoughts on Walsh again?
Yeah, he's super interesting to me. The guy we saw in 108 plate appearances in 2020 was nothing like the guy that we'd seen before. I mean, obviously the home run per fly ball rate is going to come down. But, the contact rate was way up, close to an 80%, 79.2% contact rate, which is an awesome contact rate, well above league average. The O swing was okay, a little bit reminiscent. His run was kind of similar to like a Matt Olson, type run that he had towards the end of the season, although Olson's was for a longer period of time. But, there's always the platoon concerns with the lefty there. So I haven't been drafting him. I think there's too many questions, like there's too many risks there, but super interesting what he was able to do towards the end of last season. I mean, 11 barrels and 108 plate appearances. Max exit velo was solid, close to 113. So I think a lot of things to like, but where he's going in drafts right now, I just can't buy into that small sample size and work with that, especially worrying about him being platooned.
Yeah, no, that's the biggest question. Like the guy's good, he's legit, but playing time, small sample. What do we get there? Like Christian Walker after him, I'd go for. Trey Boo's even interesting there. Roddy Tellez later. There's some other options at first base I'd be targeting over Mr. Walsh. Dave Petroziello, our buddy, asks, I like Santander to possibly put up Conforto-like numbers, not Conforto's BABIP inflated 2020, of course, while going 90 picks later. What do you guys think? I think he's dead on with that. I feel like it's Steamer projections. Santander slightly higher average, couple fewer homers and steals, very similar overall thoughts by Steamer, and I think that's pretty fair, actually. So I think it's a very good comp, and you get him a lot later. So I like that quite a bit. What about you?
I think that's a good comp. Like just looking at the projections, Santander's like a $14 player, and Conforto's like a $16 player. So, and then like you mentioned, one is a really big value going where they are at ADP, and then one is a little bit of a non-value going where they are at ADP. So I'd rather have Santander going where he's going for sure. But I think it's a good call. And I think the batting average, which is definitely going to be better for Santander.
Yep. Craig Schumann has another question for us, outfield related. Who do you guys like the most of JBJ, Jason Hayward, and Avisail Garcia? For me, it's JBJ, just the caveats of where's he going to play. But if he's got an everyday job, I'm a believer in what he brings to the table. So I'm taking JBJ. What about you?
I would go with Avisail Garcia. I think that, another one guy where last year he was going around pick 180, and he had a rough season, but everything's there to be a good player. And I don't think he just lost the quality of the batted ball that he could make like last year. I just don't think that happened. So I think he could be really good. He was hitting leadoff like for a long time for the Brewers, and he plays every day. He should play every day next year as well. So sign me up for Avisail Garcia next year. Power, speed, can help with the batting average. I like him a lot.
Yep, I still don't hate Avi at all. Dynasty Junkie asks, I remember Manny Margot being a guy Toby analyzed in the early days of the podcast, and it's always been a troublesome profile, but I just can't quit the guy, especially after a strong playoff showing. I also think he'll get a lot of at-bats in 2021. At this price, should I remain in? I love him. I talked about him earlier. I think he's a great value at that point, especially not expected a platoon right now. So I am all aboard a non-platooning Manny Margot where he's getting drafted. Another steals target, Mr. Steve Brunn, if you're listening to this later in the podcast. So I like it a lot as his price tag. What about you, Toby?
Yeah, I think at this price tag, it's solid. I mean, the issue with Margot was always where he was going, I think. I mean, God, there was one year, I think, it was him and Delino DeShields were like battling for who could get into the top 100, I think. And just a shout out to, I think it's Slash My Peep Line, right? Or what is it? Peep My Slash Line?
Peep My Slash
Line. Slash My Peep Line. Oh, man. The first episode I ever did of the podcast was Wilson Contreras and Manny Margot deep dive. So huge shout out to that call. I know we chatted about that a little bit on Twitter. But Margot, I mean, the one thing that I like about what I'm seeing is the issue with him has always been the batted ball quality. Last year, highest exit velo, tied for 2018. The max exit velo wasn't quite there, but he did have 5 barrels last year, 4.1% barrel percentage, but only 1 home run. So I think there was a lack of luck there in the home runs. And I think that the Rays have shown that they will run him. So especially if it looks like he's going to get full-time plate appearances, I mean, sign me up. If he's getting full-time plate appearances, push the man up for sure. I don't know if that's going to happen, though. And he was weak side of the platoon, but, man, he was just accumulating stolen bases like nobody's business during the season. I mean, they have him projected for 18 stolen bases and 425 plate appearances. He stole 12 and 159, last year. So obviously we need to regress that, but I just think I think where he's going right now, he could be a really big value if he gets that full-time plate appearances.
MS at SMMS 79 asks Joey Gallo and an OBP league. A love story? That's about the only league you should talk about Joey Gallo in.
Yeah, totally. And that's one of the things is you just got to the OBP is not even going to be that good at where he's at. But, one thing that I like to do, I like to use the auction calculator just really quickly on FanGraphs. And you can just kind of run in a 15-team league. Let's see. Let's just do it right now. I'm just going to do with generally the regular things. What I do is I'll do the auction calculator, and then I look at what are the differences, that these guys are putting up when they are in an average league versus an OBP league. And so let's see, where's Gallo? He's not even on this top. He's not even in the front, not even in the first guys. Is he negative? Joey Gallo is going to be negative value or is he DH only? Is he not first? Oh, he's outfield.
He's outfield.
That's why, Bubba. I mean, this always makes for
podcast.
Yeah, I know.
It's late.
I'm trying to put one and one together. I know it's late, and I'm sitting here. So Joey Gallo is an $11 player in an average league, and then you change that over to an OBP league. So $11 to wait for it. Everybody's on the edge of their seat. To an $18 player, right?
$7 bump's pretty good.
So a $7 bump just based on average to OBP, right? That's huge. And $18 for an outfielder, I mean, you're talking, a top 60 guy, something like that. I don't know. I'm always bad at that type of stuff. So your $18, yeah, it's around 65th pick. So Byron Buxton, George Springer, Starling Marte, those are $18 players in an average league. So that just shows you the type of bump you can get. So definitely Gallo in an OBP league. It's so key in OBP leagues to take advantage of those guys that get those OBP bumps, because a lot of times our minds are stuck on the batting average piece of it.
And I will say, I didn't mention it for a lot of them, but a lot of the later guys we talked about in the NFBC ADP, some of the guys we really liked are even better in OBPs, like Schwarber and company. So keep them in mind.
Totally.
Nick at Biscardi 17. What are your thoughts on Robles? Is he slow Billy Hamilton because of StatCast data, or is he premium prospect yet to realize potential? He's not Billy Hamilton. I'm not going to go there. I think that's a little disrespect. But I think the prospect stuff, he was better than he is right now. So I keep holding out hope that he's going to find it. I just think we might have seen 2019 might be who he is. So, and I'm fine with that if he's getting drafted where he's getting drafted. So, better than Billy Hamilton, maybe not we're still not waiting on his potential yet.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, Robles isn't really a rabbit. Robles hits 10 plus home runs a year. Hamilton literally hit you one home run a year, and he was not good at baseball. And so I think that's the major difference, is that Robles won't. And so I think it's kind of in the middle, it's yes, he's a prospect of pedigree and he could still meet that. If he goes 20-30 with a 260 batting average this year, I mean, it's well within, I think, what Victor Robles is capable of doing. He's got that very good max exit velo as well, but he can't square it up that well. And I don't know how much of a skill that is going to be. So I think he's somewhere in between, where he's a useful fantasy player right now, and he could be really good, and he'll have seasons where he's not very good, and he'll have seasons where he's better. and it's just going to be kind of what side of the luck was he on that particular year, or maybe he'll prove us all wrong and be really good. We'll see.
Yep, we'll see. Richard Sands asks, who do you like for mid-late outfielders and Fantrax best ball between David Dahl, Upton, Chu, Pilar, and Cordero? How would you rank them? So I'm going to rank them Chu, Upton, Dahl, Pilar, Franchi for me. That's where I go, but they're very similar.
I'd have Upton way the hell up there.
Yeah, I'd probably have him over. I actually took him over Chu in a draft. I'm in with Richard right now. I think he's going too late. I think Chu, if he's in the right spot leading off again in an because a lot of these points leagues are OBP based, he's tremendous. So that was the angle there. But I agree that Upton, he's getting way underdrafted this year.
Yeah, Upton. I love Upton. I love Upton, and I think people are starting to love Upton. I was drafting him in my first draft. I think I got him around pick 380 ADP, something like that, something ridiculous. And now his ADP is in the low 300s. I got not sniped, but I was going to pick him at right around 300, and somebody grabbed him at 285 in the draft I'm in right now. I think Upton could be huge. That was the other guy I was thinking about for the Trent Grisham, but I don't think he's going to he doesn't have the speed that Grisham has, but I think he could provide similar value, certainly. I think he's great. I think he's a really great value.
Edwin Turnage asks, how do you like Hunter Renfroe in Fenway Park for 2021? I took him in round 23, set the new min in my DC with Toby. Well, he's in the DC with you, so how do you like Hunter Renfroe?
I don't know how I feel about Hunter Renfroe. I mean, it's interesting if they give him full-time plate appearances. The challenge is the batting average. I mean, 231, 248, 216, 156. Steamer has him projected for 234. So the projection of that type of batting average, you just need them to really come through in the home run department, which he most certainly could. And I mean, he's a good defensive outfielder. He won that Gold Glove. So, I mean, I think it's fine. There's certainly upside there for power, but I just think that the batting average floor is really low. And it's hard to have a guy like that consistently in your lineup because then you're eating that a lot of plate appearances at that really bad batting average. But I can certainly see the intrigue in having him and the Red Sox saying the right things in terms of him being an everyday player for them. So I guess we'll soon find out.
Yep. I'm with you. He's intriguing. If you do the whole balls hit in Fenway Park compared to everywhere else, his home run totals goes through the roof. Then again, the fun conversation is how many of those would have hit off the monster. Who knows? But he still would have got a bump. So it's a good ballpark for him. The platoon's a big question. The batting average is a big question, as you mentioned. So I don't mind him late. Not sure taking him that early, but I see the appeal if everything bounces correctly. Big Friendly Giant asks, of the guys who you discussed in part 2 or late part 1, who has the least amount of job security, either working in a platoon, possible free agent, or prospect ready to be brought up? That's a loaded question. It's a very loaded question because that could be a lot of different guys. But is there anybody that stands out to you right away? Because Eddie Rosario, we don't know where he's going to land. That could be somewhat interesting. I think that's one that stands out a little bit.
My cat is freaking out right now. By the way, I don't know if you can hear the cat. Cat is making an appearance. Jackson is making an appearance on the podcast. We mentioned a little bit with Reyes. I don't know if that will actually be the case. I mean, you're looking for lefties, right?
Yeah, for platoons. Yeah.
I mean, there were some instances where Verdugo, right? He sat against lefties last year, but I think that was more I know there are some attitude issues maybe there. I don't know if there's any early guys that I'm super worried about that. Let me just check in on Verdugo. No, he was fine. He's been fine against lefties. So I don't know why they did that. Dominic Smith.
Yeah.
Dominic Smith. Dominic Smith, Brandon Lau, maybe.
I think where was the guy I was just looking at? I think I talked about how much he could be an asset with the Yankees, but Clint Frazier's one guy that would concern me because they've been willing to pull the plug on him a few times, and they could end up platooning him, which could be interesting.
Yeah.
So, big
it's a good question, though. It's a good filter.
It's a deep question.
Yeah.
And he's got another deep question for us that I wouldn't even know where to start off the top of my head without really digging in, because most guys we didn't talk to bat 8th or 9th in their lineup. But he says, do you see any batting 8th or 9th because that bats are king that that might end up there that could struggle with you, because that's very important for the outfield. I really don't think we mentioned any guys batting 8th or 9th.
No, I mean, one guy that I'm very interested to see where he ends up is Adam Eaton.
Yeah.
Now that he's with the White Sox, should play every day, I think, in that lineup. I mean, if they put him at the top of that lineup, for batting first or second, which is a possibility. I wouldn't give him that many plate appearances, but if he were to do that, or if he were to start off hot, and he could make a huge jump up, I mean, if he's batting at the top of that lineup, like you could get close to leading the league in runs just from having a decent OBP and getting on base, in front of those guys. So that's the one guy that jumps out to me that I would want to know kind of where he's going to be in the order, and that will determine a lot of kind of the value that maybe he has. But he's going really late right now in drafts, even after the signing. People don't seem to be that into old man Eaton. Yeah, that's the one that's jumping out. I mean, Robles obviously hits towards the back end of the lineup.
Yeah, if he were to bat 6th right now, which would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be really nice compared to where he was batting. Him batting 9th. It was brutal last year. And then Byron Buxton. I mean, he was batting leadoff, but he's not necessarily an OBP guy. And Polanco was hurt and not playing really well. So that's also something to factor in. Is Buxton going to be back in front at the top of the lineup, or is he going to be further down the lineup?
And then our last question is from Mr. Danny at Danny Shuttler. He asked for later picks, so I'm thinking past 300 or something. Guys we didn't really talk about. Who are guys who really late with stolen base upside? He mentions Tauchman, Oliva, Olivares, Monty Harrison, Mercado, Mullins, Straw. Mercado's one that really stands out for me. I think Andrew Stevenson's interesting to project the lead off for the Nats. That's another one to keep an eye on there with Washington. You mentioned Roman Quinn earlier. The guys he mentioned are pretty valid. I'm not going to knock those options as well, but I think Tim LaCastro is another one as well. Any later guys that stand out as stolen base had really late stuff?
I think you called it out with Mercado. Looks really good. Bader is another one. I don't know why people are always sleeping on Kiermaier, but he's going late. Sorry, I was a little distracted there. There's music playing in my in the living room right now. A little Christmas music. So if you saw me going like this in the thing, I was trying to signal the podcast is still rolling because I'm giving long-winded answers like this. So yeah, I think those are the guys. There's Anthony Alford is one super late. That's really interesting in Draft Champions. He's projected right now to be a starting outfielder for the Pirates. So yeah, I'll stop there so that we can end this, Bubba. It's late.
Yeah, it's getting late. It's time to wrap it up. But awesome questions as usual from you guys. You guys kicked butt, and that's really loaded questions. They're kind of tough to not do without giving a massive deep dive into. So something to think about we could do for a future discussion on it. Very tricky. But outfield part 2 in the books. Most likely we'll be heading to the starting pitchers next week. So that should always be interesting. Merry Christmas to you as well, Kevin. Hope you have a good one. And parting thoughts, Toby, as we have Christmas coming up on Thursday.
Parting thoughts. I hope everybody has a really nice holiday. For those of you who celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a great holiday. For those of you who celebrate Hanukkah, I hope you had a great Hanukkah. And then New Year's as well. I mean, I think we'll probably be coming to you guys before that happens. But I really hope you have a nice holiday period. I know it's going to be a different holiday than we usually get. But hopefully we're able to maintain some of those traditions that make the day special and spend some time with some of our loved ones. So Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you for listening and all your thoughtful questions and being a part of our holiday season. We really appreciate all of you. So Merry Christmas.
Appreciate it all. Hope you guys have a great holiday season. Stay safe out there. It's a wild one, as Toby mentioned. It'll be a little different than usual, but stay safe out there. We appreciate you all. Hope you all have a Merry Christmas, and we will be back. We should have an episode before the New Year's to get you to keep the ball rolling on your positional previews. But until next time.
We never rest, Bubba.
No,
we never
do
rest.
Not. We do not. We're every
Mostly
fifth
because
day.
we podcast really late, and we're
yeah, we don't rest. Like I don't know what sleep is these days. It's cool.
What is it?
What is sleep? That's a whole philosophical question. But you can find Toby on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. I am at BDentric. And again, thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys next week. Outfield position preview part 2 in the books. See ya.